It all started in the middle of a freezing rainstorm. The kind that cuts through your coat no matter how thick it is and makes you question why you ever left the house. I was sitting in my car, parked outside a grocery store, waiting for the rain to ease up before heading inside. I remember the heater was blasting, my phone was in my hand, and I was scrolling through whatever app could distract me from the fact that my day was going nowhere. It was one of those dull, uneventful days where you feel stuck, not just physically but mentally. That's when I noticed him.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mystic Yarn Tales. Kindly subscribe and let's enjoy the story together.
He was standing by the store entrance, holding a soggy piece of cardboard with shaky letters written in black marker. It said, "Lost my job. Need food for my kids. God bless." He looked soaked to the bone, his thin jacket clinging to him like a second skin. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his hands were trembling, either from the cold or from something deeper. I wish I could say I jumped out of my car to help him right then and there, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring. It's not that I didn't care. It's just, what do you even do in that situation? Hand him a few bucks? Buy him some food? Walk up to him and say, "Hey, I know life sucks, but hang in there?" None of it felt like enough, so I did nothing. And I wasn't the only one. I watched as people walked past him, heads down, pretending not to see. Some glanced his way, their faces a mix of pity and discomfort, but no one stopped. One guy even muttered something as he passed, shaking his head like the man with the sign was doing something wrong just by being there. I felt this deep, gnawing guilt in my stomach, but still, I stayed in my car, hiding behind my fogged-up windows, hoping someone else would step in, and then someone did. He wasn't anyone special at first glance, just a guy in his late 40s, wearing a cheap raincoat that looked like it had seen better days. He walked up to the man with the sign, but instead of just dropping a few coins in his hand and walking away, he stopped. I mean, really stopped. I cracked my window a bit, letting the cold air in, so I could hear. The guy, let's call him Mike, asked the man with the sign his name. "Greg," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. Mike nodded like he was talking to an old friend. "Greg, what's going on?" At first, Greg hesitated. I guess when you spend enough time being ignored, you don't expect anyone to actually care. But something about Mike's tone, it wasn't just polite, it was genuine, made Greg open up. Through the rain and the passing cars, I heard bits and pieces. Greg had been laid off months ago. His car had been repossessed. He was staying in a cheap motel with his 2 kids, using what little money he could scrape together from odd jobs to keep them fed. As Greg talked, I could see the weight of everything he was carrying, not just the wet clothes or the empty wallet, but the exhaustion, the shame, the fear of failing the people who depended on him. And Mike? He just stood there, nodding, listening, not interrupting, not rushing him, just being there. After a while, Mike said, "Wait here for a minute." He walked into the grocery store, leaving Greg standing there, holding his soggy sign. I thought, okay, maybe he's going to grab him a sandwich or something. But when Mike came back out about 15 minutes later, he was pushing a cart. And it wasn't just a couple of items. This cart was full. Bread, milk, canned food, diapers, everything you need to get through a tough week. Greg's mouth fell open. He kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Mike handed Greg the bags and said, "This should help for now." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a prepaid gift card. "There's $50 on this. Use it for whatever else you need." Greg just stood there, clutching the bags, tears streaming down his face. He kept saying, thank you," over and over, his voice cracking with every word. I swear, even the rain seemed to quiet down for a moment. I couldn't sit in my car any longer. I got out and walked over to Mike as Greg disappeared down the street, carrying his groceries like they were the most precious things in the world. "Hey," I said, feeling a little awkward. "That was incredible. Why'd you do all that?" Mike shrugged, like it was no big deal. "I've been there," he said simply. He went on to explain. Years ago, he'd lost everything. his wife, his house, his job. He ended up living out of his car for months, scraping by on whatever he could find. One day, he said, "A stranger helped me." Just like that. They didn't know me anything, but they showed me love when I needed it most. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be here today. I was stunned. "You don't even know Greg," I said. Mike smiled. "Doesn't matter. When you've been in his shoes, you don't see a stranger. You see yourself." That conversation stuck with me long after I drove home. A week later, I went back to that grocery store. And guess what? Greg was there again. But this time, he wasn't holding a sign. He was standing by the entrance, helping another homeless man load groceries into a cart. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man who had been begging in the rain just days ago was now the one helping someone else. I parked my car and walked up to him. "Hey, Greg," I said. He looked up, a little startled, but then smiled. "Hey, you're the guy from the other day, right?" "Yeah," I said. "What's all this?" He chuckled, a little embarrassed. "Mike inspired me. He told me that sometimes, all it takes is one person to remind you that you're not invisible. So when I got a little extra work this week, I figured it was my turn." That hit me hard. Mike didn't just change Greg's life. He created a ripple effect. And it didn't stop there. It changed me too. I started looking at people differently after that day. Instead of walking past someone struggling and thinking, "That's not my problem," I started asking myself, what if it were me? What would I want someone to do? At first, it was small things. Buying an extra sandwich and handing it to the guy sitting by the gas station. Keeping a few spare bills in my pocket just in case. Donating a little more to the food bank. But over time, it became more than that. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping out on weekends. I started talking to people, really listening to their stories. And you know what? It felt good. Not in a self-righteous way, but in a way that reminded me of what Mike said. When you've been in their shoes, you don't see a stranger. You see yourself. So, here's the thing. You don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. You don't need to fix someone's entire life. Sometimes, all it takes is one small act of love. Listening, helping, caring, to create a ripple that can change everything. Mike's kindness didn't just help Greg that day. It set off a chain reaction that touched me, Greg, and who knows how many others. And if you're reading this, maybe it can touch you too. Next time you see someone struggling, don't just look away. Stop. Ask their name. Listen. You might be surprised at what happens next.